Welcome everyone to the Crested Butte Museum Virtual Learning Series with Dwayne Vandenbush. This is the 7th series out of 9, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. throughout March. All episodes are aired on our YouTube channel, Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum. If you'd like to watch them after you watch this one or share them with other folks who are passionate about the history of the Gunnison country, please do so. This program is made possible by our two sponsors, the Gunnison Trails and Hartman Castle Preservation Fund. And it's also made possible because of you all who have donated and become members of the Crested Butte Museum. So thank you so much for doing that. And if you'd like to support this program or any other program that the museum staff have been working very hard to achieve, please visit our webpage or stop in and say hi downstairs and see our exhibit space. We are open 11 to 5 p.m. daily. We do have a couple upcoming events. The next one is our historic pub crawl featuring Vandenbush and Polly O'Brosler, and also George Sibley, some wonderful authors here in the Gunnison Valley. So that will be taking place on February 26th, which is a Monday, from 6 to 8 p.m. All that information is available on our webpage, crestedbuttemuseum.com, or come downstairs. We also have trivia coming up. And if you've been watching this, there might be a question or two that'll spring up on one of our trivia nights. Those will be Tuesdays in March downstairs in the museum space. Doors will open at 5 o'clock. We'll begin around 5:30 and finish at 7 p.m. You can have a team, or if you're so smart by an individual, you can come and compete by yourself. We'll have some fun drinks, non-alcoholic and alcoholic, and nacho bar available. So we'll have a cash bar and all that good yumminess. And we have themes that include pop culture, history, movies, science, 80s, 90s, 70s, you name it. We're going to have a good time. So come support the museum for Tuesday trivia nights. Information once again on the webpage, or call us at 349-1880. And that's all I really have to share. So we're going to jump into our next one, which is called Lake City and the surrounding areas. And we have 2 more to go after that, 5 silver camps and skiing. So Vandenbush.
Yeah, thanks very much, Melinda, and welcome everybody. Tonight we've got a couple of towns that are kind of interesting. One is 55 miles south of Gunnison, Lake City. One is about 50 miles north of Gunnison, and that is Marble, and they're both very famous. Lake City is famous throughout the nation because of Alfred Packer. Everybody's heard of the Colorado Cannibal. And the other one, Marble, is internationally famous because of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, all kinds of monuments nationwide and worldwide, the #1 marble town in the world. So we're going to start off with Lake City first, and I want to tell everybody that at the end, we will have 3 trivia questions, and whoever answers it first will get a book that I've done on Lake City, kind of a pictorial. So take notes. So we'll start off with Lake City. Lake City is at 8,671 feet, one of the most beautiful places ever in Colorado, right on the edge of the San Juans. And it's right where 2 streams come together. The Lake Fork of the Gunnison River and Henson Creek come together right at Lake City. It's the county seat of Hinsdale County, and it's one of the 2 least populated counties in the state, along with Mineral County, with Creed as the county seat, and San Juan County with Silverton as the county seat. You put those 3 together and they are 3 of the least populated counties in the nation. Lake City was once known as the metropolis of the San Juan, and very early it was larger than any of the other more prominent mining camps that we think of today, like Telluride and Ouray and Silverton. It's in the Colorado Mineral Belt, a mining belt that runs from Caribou near Boulder in the north all the way down to Silverton in southwestern Colorado. 250 miles long, 50 miles wide, running in that southwesterly direction. And every great precious metal mining area in Colorado is located within that mineral belt, with one sensational exception. And that's the greatest of them all, and that's Cripple Creek Victor, which is outside of the mineral belt and which is really an extinct volcano. Lake City is also dominated by 5 majestic 14,000-foot mountains nearby, and they're within about 20 miles of Lake City. Now, the Ute Indians, the first 2 photos we saw were of Lake City very early. The Ute Indians were the first inhabitants of the Lake City area. But because of the harsh climate and the high terrain, they got out of here and went to the Uncompahgre Valley in the summer. They were usually just passing through in the late spring, summer, and early fall. And there's a good picture of some of the teepees of about 2,500 Ute Indians that once lived in the Gunnison country. The real start of Lake City began with the building of the Saguache to San Juan Toll Road in 1874. In that year, the town of Saguache, 70 miles from Gunnison, tried to capture the trade of the new San Juan mining camps to the west and beat Del Norte out. Two great road builders were hired. One was Otto Mears. The other one was Enos Hotchkiss. Otto Mears was called the Pathfinder of the San Juan. And you're taking a good look right there at the other guy, that's Enos Hotchkiss. They were hired to build from Saguache through where Lake City is today, no Lake City then, and then up Henson Creek and over Engineer Pass into the great silver camps of Animas Fork, Silverton, and Ouray. In November, Hotchkiss, leading a road survey, discovered rich gold in what soon became the Great Golden Fleece Mine. Following that discovery, many of the road workers split and quit to look for gold. Enos Hotchkiss, however, did not. He went to the North Fork Valley, became a rancher, and today Hotchkiss, Colorado is named for him, one of the beautiful towns of the North Fork Valley. Weeks after the find, Lake City began, and it was named for nearby Lake San Cristobal. That lake had been formed, according to geologists, around 1270 AD. Around that time, the side of a mountain above Lake City, because of leaching, came down the mountainside like a railroad train, hit the Lake Fork of the Gunnison River, and dammed it up, creating Lake San Cristobal. The name of that slide was soon given, Slumgullion, named for the yellow color of a soup that miners had. The slide has a yellow color to it even today and still moves today, about 21 inches a year in some places and more in others. In the same year Lake City began, the Hayden Survey came to the area, part of a scientific study of the West. Two of Ferdinand Hayden's men, Franklin Rhoda and H.W. Wilson, we'll go back to that previous one for a second, Melinda, and there they are on top of Sunshine Peak in 1874 with a transit, getting a good look at all the nearby mountains and nearby area. On top of Sunshine Peak, the area you're looking at right now, an event occurred that shocked them. It was typical of the Colorado mountains very early in the game and even today. Rhoda wound up writing 7 pages about it in his report. He said, lightning had struck a nearby peak and the electricity had been discharged. Almost before the sound reached, the tickling and frying in our hair began. We were electrified, and we started as fast as we could over the loose rock down the side of the peak. But we had scarcely gotten more than 30 feet from the top when it was struck. When I was a young fellow, we'll go back to that previous one again, Melinda. When I was a young fellow in the Gunnison country in 1962, I was at the north end of Taylor Park on top of Tellurium Peak at about 13.5, had my parka on because a storm was moving in, and here I know nothing about the mountains, and all at once I saw a spark go from my shoulder to my wrist on my parka, and my hair started buzzing. Now, I didn't know what was going on, but I got out of there as fast as I could. In 1874, one of the most sensational stories in Colorado history occurred near Lake City, the saga of Alfred Packer. Packer had been born in 1842 in Pennsylvania. As a boy, he suffered from epilepsy. He served 8 months in the Army of the North in the Civil War before being discharged because of the epilepsy. He came to Colorado Territory. We'll keep it there, Melinda. He came to Colorado Territory after the war, mining in Georgetown, and then worked as a jackwhacker and drove ore wagons for a time. In 1873, Packer was in Provo, Utah, and convinced 20 other miners to go with him to New Gold Strike in Breckenridge, Colorado. All the men went together because of Indian danger. Alfred Packer told the men that he knew the San Juan and the region around Breckenridge very well, and he also knew of a shortcut to the camp. In late January, the 20 men made their way to Chief Ouray's Indian camp near the present site of Delta. Chief Ouray tried to convince Packer and the men not to travel from his camp. because the winter of 1873 and 74 was one of the snowiest and coldest ever. However, Alfred Packer convinced 5 others that he knew the way to Breckenridge and that they could make it, getting a jump on other miners coming into the new gold camp. Shannon Bell, Israel Swan, 16-year-old George Noon, Frank Miller, and Jim Humphrey were the men who left with Packer. They left Chief Uray's camp on February 9, 1874, into a mounting snowstorm. That was the last time anybody ever saw any of them again, except for Alfred Packer. 66 days after leaving Chief Uray's camp, Packer walked into the Indian Agency at Los Pinos near Cochetope Pass in the Gunnison country. Packer told the agency head, Major Charles Adams, that he had become snowblind and hurt his leg, so he had been left by his party and wandered for many weeks with no food but berries and an occasional rabbit or squirrel. He did not know what happened to the others. He thought they probably made their way to Baker's Park, near where Silverton is today. However, Packer had a lot of money and many possessions on him that probably didn't belong to him. He was trapped in many inconsistencies, and he finally told a different story. He said that 3 men had died and were cannibalized, and then Shannon Bell killed Israel Swan, and Packer had to kill him in self-defense. Packer then did take meat from bodies and walked into Los Pinos. He looked pretty good for a man who had been starving supposedly for 66 days, and one Indian, after hearing his story, said to Major Charles Adams, "Him too damn fat." And Alfred Packer did look pretty good for a man who'd been wandering in the wilderness for 66 days. Alfred Packer was lodged in the Saguache jail until an investigation could be launched. On August the 20th, 1874, John Randolph, sketching scenes for Harper's Weekly on the great town of Lake City, found 5 bodies decomposed on Cannibal Plateau just above the mining town. He came upon them from the terrible smell. On that same day, by coincidence or not, Alfred Packer escaped from the Saguache jail, was not seen again for 9 years. In 1883, 9 years later, Frenchy Cabazon, who had been one of the 20 men with Packer and Provo, walked into a bar at Fort Fetterman, Wyoming, and saw a man who said he was John Schwartz. He was recognized as Alfred Packer, and soon was returned to Lake City to stand trial. This time he told another story. Packer said that he was out looking for a route to safety, and while gone, Shannon Bell had gone insane, killed the 4 other men, and Packer had to kill him in self-defense. Packer was tried in the Lake City courthouse, built in 1877, still there today, still a courthouse today, and was convicted on 5 counts of murder. Judge Melville Gary gave an eloquent judgment, but a Saguache saloon keeper by the name of Larry Boland ran into the Lake City saloon and gave a now famous version of what the judge said. Dolan told everybody in the saloon, quote, "The judge said, 'Stand up, you man-eating son of a bitch, stand up. There were 7 Democrats in Hinsdale County, and you man-eating bastard, ate 5 of them. Damn you. I sentence you to be hanged by the neck until you're dead, 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 as a warning against reducing the Democrat population of this county.'" I might point out that Hinsdale County has never voted Democratic in its history. I think Democrats fear to go there. Packer got the death penalty, but his conviction was overthrown because there was no death penalty when the crime was committed. In 1874, when he committed the crime, it was Colorado Territory. We hadn't become a state yet, and there was no death penalty. So you can't do ex post facto. You can't have the death penalty for a guy who committed a crime when there was no death penalty. So Packer had to be tried again. He also could not be charged with murder again because of double jeopardy. Can't be tried twice for the same crime. So 3 years later, in 1886, he was tried again, this time in Gunnison, on 5 counts of manslaughter, and convicted on 5 counts and sentenced to 8 years on each one. Alfred Packer served 15 years in Canyon City at the penitentiary before a Denver Post reporter, Polly Pry, got him released. The only evidence, she said, was circumstantial, and Alfred Packer was the only one who knew really what happened. Packer lived the rest of his life in Littleton and died at the age of 65 in 1907 and is buried there. Today, you can go to Colorado University and go into the cafeteria and get yourself a Packer burger. Nice and rare, a lot of ketchup and mustard. I don't know what they were thinking. Whenever I think of Alfred Packer, I'm reminded of Robert Service in The Spell of the Yukon, talking about the cremation of Sam McGee, when he said, "There are strange things done neath the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest we ever did see was the night on the marge of old Lake LaBarge when we cremated Sam McGee." By 1876, 2 years after its founding, Lake City was booming with 2,500 people in the area, great mines with names like the Golden Fleece, Hidden Treasure, Black Wonder, and the Ute Ulay. It was also on the Saguache to San Juan toll road, with Barlow and Sanderson stages carrying passengers and jack trains carrying ore. The greatest freighter of the area, however, was one Dave Wood, who was legendary for moving freight from the end of railroad tracks to the town of the San Juan, including Lake City. In one day in 1881, he hauled out 400,000 pounds of ore and moved over 100,000 pounds of supplies and equipment. Fantastic when huge freight wagons carried less than 2 tons. He became a household name in western Colorado in the 1880s. He had money, large warehouses, the best wagons and drivers, the best stock, and was totally dependable. He became a legend on the western slope of Colorado, akin to the great Ben Holiday in the West. One day, a young woman accosted Dave Wood around Montrose, and she said, "Sir, you've been in these mountains very long?" And David Wood eyed her with contemptuous disdain and said, "Madam, I haul these damn mountains in here." And that's the title of a book written by his daughters, "I Hauled These Mountains in Here," the story of David Wood. In addition to the great mines and the toll road, Lake City became the county seat of Hinsdale County, named after the Lieutenant Governor of Colorado Territory, George W. Hinsdale. It also had the Crook Smelter located south of town, right next to a huge waterfall. And there it is today. And if you drive from Lake City today to Lake San Cristobal, you can still see that big waterfall. The building is no longer there. On top of that, one more thing in the offing, and that was a railroad. The Denver and Rio Grande had one planned from Saponaro on the main line, 36 miles into Lake City. And there's a good shot of the powerhouse at the Crook Smelter. And that took care of a lot of the ore from the nearby mines. The Lake City Silver World newspaper began in 1876, first paper in the San Juan, and Grant Houston still continues the tradition in 2024. A new courthouse was built in 1877, still the courthouse today. In 1876, Presbyterian minister George Darley and his brother Alexander built the oldest church on the western slope. The Presbyterian Church still has services every Sunday today. Darley would recall his experiences in the region in a great book, Pioneering in the San Juan. In it, he recalls skiing over Engineer and Cinnamon passes in the winter to mining camps. He had a good heart also. When a Lake City man died of alcoholism, Darley insisted that he write to the family that the man had died of pneumonia instead, sparing the family. The great days of Lake City were from 1874 to 1882. Winter sports were popular: skating on Lake San Cristobal, sleighing, skiing. Miners on Engineer Mountain skied down from the Frank Huff mine to Rose's cabin, 3 miles in 15 minutes. Target shooting, roller skating in the Opera House, now the Armory. Drilling contests, baseball, and boxing were other activities. Jack Dempsey from Manassas, Colorado, fought in Lake City before becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. The great Susan B. Anthony came to Lake City in 1877, spoke on behalf of women having the vote. John Crook of the Crook Smelter left Lake City and invented tinfoil, becoming a multimillionaire. The Lake City Beer Garden opened up in 1878, a half-mile up Henson Creek. It had tables, benches, rustic walks and swings. Beer was served. Dances held to the tune of songs like Wait Till the Sun Shines, Nellie, Down by the Old Mill Stream, When You and I Were Young, Maggie, and Wait for the Wagon. 3 boats took passengers on the lake during that time. Lake City was now the largest town in the San Juan and had a great red light district with 29 saloons, along with gambling establishments, one of which was run by the famous Poker Alice. By the early 1880s, Lake City was beginning to slide. It had low-grade ore. The railroad was delayed. So keep that on for a second, Melinda. And the weather and cost of transportation were a problem. Now that is a 85-foot high wooden trestle over Elk Creek, just to the north of Lake City. And I may have mentioned this in a little earlier episode, but a 9-year-old girl named Betty Steele from Lake City was hired to walk every time the train went over that trestle with water and sand to put out any fires that might catch the wood on fire. Later on, Betty Steele became Betty Wallace, who wrote the original book on the Gunnison country, was a great person and my mentor. The Lake City branch of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, which had been graded 36 miles in from Saponaro, was delayed and didn't arrive until 1889. There you get a great shot of the Lake City Depot. Around Lake City, satellite mining towns began to open up. And there's the last train that ran, the last Rio Grande train that ran into Lake City, May the 25th, 1933. Other train would run a little bit later on. Around Lake City now, satellite mining camps began to open up. Around Henson Creek, the little town of Henson opened at the Ute-Ulay mine. And there you got a good look at the Ute-Ulay mine in the 1870s, just up Henson Creek. Capital City was located 9 miles up the creek in 1877 by George Lee, who wanted it to become the state capital. Lee built a famous mansion out of brick. You're getting a good look now at Capital City. And initially in the 1870s, Capital City included a theater, guest bedrooms, and a ballroom. And the famous Rose Kiln was right nearby, and there it is. And that's about the 1920s. The population soared to 800, but when Lake City boom ended, most of the people moved away. Rose's cabin was also just below Engineer Pass, 4 miles out. And there's a good shot of the Lee Mansion, which is located at Capital City, and that's where George Lee hoped to have the capital of Colorado. In 1874, Rose's cabin was built, and there you can see it just below Engineer Pass, and that's where people going up Henson Creek stopped for the night. Horses were fed and corralled, and then the next day you ascended Engineer Pass. Cordion Rose was the guy who built that. Combination stage stop, saloon, stable, and hotel with 22 rooms. It was halfway between Ouray and Lake City, and freighters and travelers stopped there before assaulting the pass the next day. And there you get a good look at Rose's cabin. 22 rooms, 4 miles below Engineer Pass. And then you assaulted 12,856 foot high Engineer Pass, and that dropped you down into the headwaters of the Animas River and the great town of Animas Forks. And then in one way you made your way to Silverton, the other way you made your way to Ouray. From Lake City, along another stream, the Lake Fork, Lake San Cristobal was passed, and then a series of mining camps with names like Carson up on the Lake Fork, and then Sherman. And there is Sherman, about 10 miles up the Lake Fork, right along the Black Wonder Mine. And finally, you came to White Cross, and then Cinnamon Pass. And then Cinnamon Pass at 12,600 feet dropped you also down into the head of the Animas. That is a great shot of Carson, which is located about 4 miles above Lake San Cristobal, and then another 4 miles up Wager Gulch, right along the Continental Divide at 12,000 feet. a sidelight on San Juan County with Silverton as the county seat. Out of 3,143 counties in the U.S., Silverton is the highest in the nation with a mean elevation of 11,240 feet. There's another good shot of Sherman. And with 638 people, it's the 12th least populated. The Silver Panic of 1893, the falling price of gold and silver, marked the end of the great days of Lake City. However, in the 1930s, Mike Burke, the owner of the Ute-Ulay mine, tried to revive mining when gold prices rose, and he used a galloping goose and came up with a new railroad called the San Cristobal. He used Denver and Rio Grande tracks, and you're looking at a great picture of it. That is a Pierce Arrow body mounted with a 80 horsepower Buick engine that ran between Saponaro and Lake City, and it pulled ore and cattle and freight. Unfortunately, it only lasted a few years. So here is Lake City today, a town of 400, brand new $14 million school all the way through the 12th grade, ski area with a pommel lift and 300 vertical feet, one of the top ice climbing areas in the state along with Ouray, the Mountaineer Movie Theater owned by Phil Verdon, a great pub crawl every August, surrounded by 4 high mountain passes and 5 14,000-foot peaks, a great museum, and with a fantastic history as the metropolis of the San Juan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, takes a look at the southern border of the Gunnison country, and now we move to exactly the northern border and the great town of Marble, over 100 miles away from Lake City, but in Gunnison County. It is one of the most unique towns in the United States, located in the north corner of Gunnison County and surrounded by White House, Sheep, and Chair Mountains. And there's a great shot of it. That is where a lot of the workers lived that worked in the mill. And then you can see the mill right in the middle of the photograph, and then Beaver Lake up in the upper right-hand corner, and where residents lived in the great town of Marble. And this was taken around 1900. Marble is in the Crystal River Valley at an elevation of 7,908 feet. And the direct way to get there from Crested Butte, about 28 miles away, is via one of the most dangerous roads in the nation. That road goes through Gothic, over Schofield Pass at almost 11,000 feet, and then takes you into the Crystal Canyon with the fearsome Devil's Punch Bowls en route. In 2 accidents 3 months apart during the summer of 1971, 9 people were killed in one accident when a Jeep went off the road and into the punch bowls, and 3 in another accident 3 months later when a Jeep went into Emerald Lake. 12 people died within 3 miles of each other on that road. Sylvester Richardson of the Parsons Survey of 1873, when everybody else left, hung around in the fall and walked over 600 miles and found the marble deposits on White House Mountain. Marble was laid out as a silver camp in 1881 in very precipitous terrain, right where Ewell and Carbonate Creeks annually brought mudslides down into the Crystal River Valley. Marble became well known when John C. Osgood of the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company and the Denver and Rio Grande, and the man who built the Redstone Castle, which still survives today, showed the white marble at the World Columbian Exposition in 1893. The pure white marble shown led to orders from all over the nation. 2 years later, in 1895, Marble got the contract for the interior of the Colorado State Capitol building, 140,000 square feet. The stone was taken by sled in the winter 4 miles from the quarry to the mill below. In 1897, there were 5 quarry openings, and Italian and Greek workers lived above in shanties called Quarry Town. And there you get a good look at where those miners live. That's right above the quarries. And I can tell you that very grim living up in there at high elevation. Marble took off when Channing Meek came to town and started the Colorado Ewell Marble Company. He had made a fortune from shredded wheat in the American Biograph Company and spent some years in Lake City. Meek built the largest finishing mill in the world, 1,742 feet by 100, at a cost of $3 million. And there you get a great shot of that marble finishing mill, 1,742 feet long, 100 feet wide, and you can see some of the company housing right above it. The stone initially came from the quarries down the mill in 9 horse-drawn wagons in the summer, and in the wintertime by sled. After that, a steam tractor was used, and there's the steam tractor. Unbelievable. 8-foot-high wheels, pulling 4 wagons each, 20 tons each wagon, had a 110 horsepower engine. Just amazing. I mean, that is a fantastic tractor, and I don't know if they got that at Minden, Nebraska, which is the home of all kinds of farm equipment, or not. In 1906, the Crystal River and San Juan Railroad was built to marble from Carbondale along the Crystal River. It was called the Can't Run and Seldom Jumps. The steam tractor couldn't keep up with demand, so Channing Meek built an electric tram, the only one in Colorado between the quarries and the mill in 1910. And there you look at that electric tram, taking blocks of marble down a very, very tough grade of 17% in some spots, 3.9 miles from the quarries to the mill. At the quarries, dynamite was used to get at the marble very early. There you get another good picture, folks. That is a hoist taking a 20-ton block of marble out of one of the quarry openings, loading it onto the electric tram, and then going 3.9 miles down a very steep grade down to the mill below. It was faster, but it was a lot more dangerous. At the quarries, dynamite was first used to get at the marble, but that was wasteful. Then plug and feathers came, and that meant you drilled into the marble, put water into the hole that you had drilled. When the water expanded and froze, it cracked the marble, and that's how they got the marble out. And then eventually, channeling machines, wire saws were used. A 50-foot wall of marble protected the mill from avalanches, the snow being deflected over the mill and into the Crystal River. The marble workers used to ride the quarry tram up to the quarries and then ski down into town after work. Probably Colorado's first ski tow was the tram. In 1903, a fire in New Jersey showed that while granite crumbled with intense heat, marble did not, and that gave a great boost to marble production. By 1912, 1,400 people lived in marble, turning out mausoleums, monuments, and stone for 400 public buildings in the U.S. Now, there's a great shot of men working at the quarry and that 20-ton block being lifted out of the quarry. Today, they use a little different method, and we'll get to that later. Sylvia Smith owned the Marble City Times in marble after the turn of the century, and she clashed with the Rio Grande Railroad, the Crystal River and San Juan, and the Marble Company. Sylvia was a muckraker and criticized the companies for watered stock and exploiting workers. She threatened the existence of the town, and 232 people of Marble signed a petition to have her removed from Marble. She was put into jail overnight, and the next day put on the railroad and sent out of town. Sylvia successfully sued for $52,000 for a violation of freedom of the press. On August the 12th, 1912, Marble suffered a great disaster when Channing Meek was killed on a runaway tram. He and 4 other men were bringing several blocks of marble down when the air brakes on the tram failed. It roared down out of control. The 4 men with Meek jumped. The 4 men survived, but Channing Meek did not. His death was a body blow to Marble. Marble's peak years came between 1910 and 1916, when it got the contract to provide stone for the Lincoln Memorial. And there you see the workers inside the quarry quarrying the stone for the Lincoln Memorial. Would go down to the mill, finishing mill, and then be finished. 40 trains of 15 cars each carried the marble to Washington, D.C. 500 men worked at finishing the marble in the mill below, before it was shipped out. Each railroad car carried from 50,000 to 70,000 pounds of marble. At the end of World War II, marble dropped. The demand for marble dropped. The distance from markets, the use of structural steel for buildings, and pollution in the industrial age marked the demise. Fire in 1925 caused a $500,000 damage to the mill, but the Vermont Marble Company bought the bankrupt Colorado Yule operation and got a contract to supply marble for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That block of pure white marble for the tomb was the largest ever quarried. When cut in the bottom of the quarry, it weighed 124 tons. As a hedge against disaster, a special hoist was sent from Proctor, Vermont to lift the block out. It was anchored to the ground up above. The block was allowed to hang for 15 minutes in the ropes below before being inched out from 125 feet down. The block was then taken to the railroad, 3.9 miles below. And there is a great picture of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier going down the railroad, going down the tram, and going down past the mill to go to Proctor, Vermont. The block was then taken to Proctor, Vermont, where it was cut down to 56 tons and taken to Arlington National Cemetery, where it became the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in 1931. The Great Depression of the 1930s hurt marble badly, but a final blow came on August the 8th, 1941, when, like the Hayden Survey report 67 years earlier, in 1874, an enormous mudslide roared down Carbonate Creek and hit the middle of the town. It cut a 1,000-foot swath through the middle of marble. Only the bandstand and the fire tower were left standing, and there you can see the bandstand and the tower standing. Everything else is wiped out. Another and more serious slide hit in 1945, but by then most of the residents had moved out. And there you get a good shot of Carbonate Creek, which just roared down and right through the middle of marble in 1945. Marble remained isolated with only a few people left. And then in the 1970s, developers came up with a community that would have housed 33,000 people, along with a ski lift, which operated for less than a year. Because of tremendous avalanche problems, Gunnison County commissioners shut it down. I'm probably the only guy still living that ever skied at that ski area. I was taken up as a guest one day and was able to ride the lift and ski down. Also, another personal note. I knew Charlie and Marge Orlowski, two old-timers in marble, and Charlie told me of kind of a secret tunnel where workers would walk into the quarry. So I would take my hockey stick, skates, and a puck. And in the winter, I'd walk through that secret passage, get down to the bottom of the quarry, and it was a giant ice rink down there because all the water had frozen. And I'd play hockey for about 2.5 hours by myself. And I can still hear the echo of the puck going whack, 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 whack. Those were the days. In 1989, two oil men from Denver, Greg Faith and Stacy Dunn, dreamed of opening the marble quarries again. 15 square miles existed in the White House Mountain area, with enough marble to last for 300 years. The demand for marble had increased with synthetic materials in building. Dunn had gone to Western State for a year and then got a degree in mineral land management from Colorado University. Much work had to be done. $4 million raised before the quarries would open. Before, marble had been lifted out of the quarries to the rim. Now a road was rebuilt, and trucks were able to get into the quarries. Stacy Dunn died tragically in an auto accident in May 1989 in South Park, but his company continued, and the quarries did reopen. The Carrara Marble Company of Italy, the #1 marble company in the world, bought the quarries in 2013. Their quarries in Italy were playing out. The blocks today taken out are from 5 to 30 tons, and they're taken down by trucks. There are 5 quarry openings and 7 portals. All the quarries are named for historical figures like Washington and Franklin and Hamilton, and they're connected by portals. The marble goes to Delta for storage and is then shipped to Norfolk, Virginia, and Houston, Texas by rail. 80% of that marble goes to Italy to be finished at the Carrara Works. 50% comes back to the U.S. 37 workers work at the quarries. They make from $22 to $32 an hour. A new open pit quarry has reopened, and marble today is humming right along one of the great towns in Colorado. A new road has been built below the old roadbed, wider and easier for trucks. 2,000 tons of waste marble is turned into road base there. 75% of the waste stays in the quarries. Diamond saws, which last from 15 to 20 years, are used to cut the stone. The life of the quarries, 300 years. They got 300 years of marble in White House Mountain. Work today goes on year-round. 2 machines using diamond saws cost $900,000. The Carrara Company owns 125 acres of land there. The quarries are at 9,500 feet, 1,600 feet above marble below. Today, in 2024, 100 people live in marble, which has a block of pure white marble cut ready to replace the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is cracked. But they don't want to really do that. But the marble is there. Marble today is a great museum, is the northernmost town of Gunnison County, has a school, a fantastic barbecue place, and beautiful Beaver Lake there. It still remains as the #1 marble town in the world. So Lake City and marble at the south and north ends of the Gunnison country, both with great and exciting pasts and great futures. And that takes care of the lecture on Lake City and marble.